Cortney, a very warm welcome to the Face Yoga Expert podcast. How are you today?
I am great. Thank you for having me. I'm super excited to be talking with you.
Thank you so much for being here. And there's so much that we're going to chat about today. And I'm so interested in everything you offer. I've been really immersing myself into it over the last few days and really understanding what you're about. And I really loved your origin story. I really loved hearing about how you started off as a waitress, and then you went into a secretary role, and then you were in a very much a corporate environment, and then you made the shift into your own business. And I'd love to know, first of all, what really triggered that shift, and why did you feel like you wanted to make that jump from corporate world into your own business?
I always kind of joke that I've lived so many lifetimes in this life, and that there's so many origin stories to that. So what inspired the shift from corporate into entrepreneurship, and I had reached the highest levels in the corporate environment, so I was supposed to be at this place that everyone says is you're golden, but I kept having these cold shower moments and they were really, really freezing cold shower moments of this cannot be it. And so after I had a number of those, I was just like, okay, I've got to figure this thing out, because the perennial quest for just around the corner, that success is just one more accolade, just one more prize, just one more title, just one more social or status symbol, that wasn't doing it for me. And looking around, I thought that's really not doing it for anyone. And so I started to find my way out, and it turned into a career, which goes all the way back to my first passions as a kid growing up. So it was sort of worked out perfectly.
I love that. And what's your favorite thing about what you do at the moment?
Ooh, watching the light come on in other people, just watching it come on or get brighter, and I can sense it, I can feel it, I can see it, and it just excites me like nothing else.
I love that. And how do you think that light is switched on within people? What sort of tools are you offering, or are they discovering within themselves in order for that light to come on?
Yeah, I think really it comes down to a remembrance, a sort of a deep remembrance and listening. And I think it often just gets so overlooked because we're not taught to listen. We're taught, actually, we are just constantly distracted. And so instead of precisely to your question of going within, and that's what sparked my first book, Change Starts Within, because I was just so done with looking outside for my answers. It just wasn't working, as I said before. So yeah, I think for most people, it's a remembrance. And when you hear certain things, you might hear someone speak, or you might read a book, and it reminds you that you're actually a heck of a lot more than you might be imagining yourself to be at any given moment. And so, yeah, that light. And then once you start fanning the flame of that, it just gets brighter and brighter, and your prospects get brighter and brighter as a result.
Yeah, I love that. And do you think that's about tapping more into our body rather than being in our mind? I know that we're often searching for answers all the time in our mind, but actually, as soon as we give ourselves space to go into our body, into our intuition, into our soul, that's when we can start to access and remember that light within us. And is that something that you teach, going into the body?
Yeah, 100%. When I give talks around the world, I actually have people get up and do things, because we say lots of times that something is psychological, and we believe it to be psychological, when really it's stuck stagnant energy in the physical body that we're just not moving through. And if we were to look at it even of what's happening emotionally, psychologically, etc., when you're latching onto a thought impulse, right, and you're attaching some sort of emotional, I want to, instead of using the word emotional, I'd rather say sensation, right? So there's a sensation, and that emotion sensation vehicle works like a vehicle. It's like a Zoom race car that goes down into your body. I mean, we could look at this in brain body scans and we'd see neuropeptides moving down into the different organs of your body and literally getting lodged there. And so lots of times people say, well, I have this pain in my gut, or I have, or, you know, my heart hurts, or whatever that is, whatever that looks like. And what we're often not realizing is that there is this mind-body connection, which of course we know, and we've been told for millennia, and science has caught up with these things like scans, et cetera, over the last, you know, a couple hundred years, especially over the last 100 years. But we know this. I mean, we know this intrinsically, we know this. And so and lots of times I often will tell people, when you're stuck, right? Because everyone can relate to this. You're stuck, or something's not going your way, or you're upset about something, and you go for a little walk. And it always resets. Mm-hmm. It's an automatic reset button. And so it's like, okay, you know, I used to joke when I was working in corporate, because I wouldn't leave my desk that much. And so I would joke that my greatest ideas came on my way to the loo, you know, because that was the only time I was actually getting up and getting away from the screen. Right. And so it's incorporating a lot more of that. I believe it's incredibly powerful to work with your body, because your body will very quickly change your state. You know, the way you're using your body will very quickly change the way you're using your mind. And so it is this constant invitation to go within the body, listen to it, listen to what it's trying to tell you when it's in suffering and struggling, and then, you know, really work with it to start to release some of that, and also learn from it. Yeah.
Definitely. And let's talk a little bit more about that sensation, or that feeling of being stuck, because I know it can get very easy, and we've all been there, I'm sure, many, many times, getting stuck in this loop, almost like hamster wheel, of negative thoughts and negative emotions. And it starts in our mind, it can impact our body. Maybe we get temporarily out of it, but then we're going back into it again. How can we start to break that negativity cycle that life and our society and the world can really push us into so quickly?
Yeah, well, so let's talk for a moment about the difference between an emotion, what we call an emotion, and what we call a sensation.
Great.
I think making that distinction is fundamental, because lots of times people say, I feel guilty. And if you really dig into that, what does it mean? It's a construct. It's a mental construct. It is a conditioning as well. So we've been conditioned to believe, especially as women, I see this a lot, you know, I feel guilty if I do these things for myself, or whatever that looks like. And it goes all the way to shame, which can be incredibly debilitating, right? But again, it's a mental construct. So there you're sort of lost and trapped in the multiplex of the mind. Whereas when you recognize there is a very real sensation occurring within my physical body right now, game's over. Yeah. When you realize and you tap into and you become aware of this sensation, the game is over. You're playing now a new game, or you're no longer playing the game. You're no longer trapped in the cycle of that game. And again, it's much easier to do this than we may think, because we are exerting enormous amounts of effort being trapped in the multiplex of the mind, right? So we are efforting so much to stay in those thought loops. And I'll tell you why. And this, I think, is really also an important distinction for people to understand is, you know, lots of times we think we're the ones thinking, but very rarely do people consciously direct their thoughts. I'm sure a lot of people in your community, because I've listened to what you do, you're phenomenal. I'm sure you've worked a lot with this, and a lot of people listening have, but most people are not consciously directing their thoughts. So what does that mean? It means that they're literally receiving an electrical impulse, right? That they then translate into this thing we call kind of verbal, and that can be verbal in our minds, in our thought, or verbal actually spoken. We turn it into verbal spoken, which is a whole nother bag of chips and a whole nother conversation. Very fascinating. But we turn it into this, right? And then what we do is we sort of hold on to it. Again, incredibly exhausting, a lot of efforting involved there. When instead we can recognize, well, that was an electrical impulse. That's interesting. And we instantaneously maybe go to whatever the sensation is. The sensation then will invite us into something called growth, or it'll invite us into something called transmutation, or it'll invite us into a deeper understanding of what the evolutionary impulses that are coursing through us are calling us to in any given moment. Right? So those distinctions alone, when we make them, when we become hyper aware of them, they're gold.
Mhm.
And it's a relearning, it's a deconditioning and a relearning and really starting to pay attention to your attention.
It really is. It's awareness. It's all awareness for sure. And talk to us a little bit about a concept which I know is often thrown around on social media, but actually, I think when we get into it, there's a lot we can learn from it, and that is toxic positivity. So, yes, we want to get out of this loop of negativity to have this awareness. But actually, do we want to get to the point where we are always trying to fight for those positive thoughts, always trying to push down those negative ones? I mean, for me, I don't think that's good. And I'm sure you're going to say the same thing. But again, how can we get out of that loop of trying to feel that we have to be so positive all the time?
Right, right. I think when we start to reframe positive and negative, so what we're really talking about is this thing feels really uncomfortable and that thing feels exhilarating or exciting or juicy, right? And when we come to a place where it's all just experience and it's all just something to marvel at, we have a deep peace within us. So we're not pushing anything away and we're not, trying to hold on to anything. It's like there's I think it was from Anthony DeMello's teachings where he said something to the effect of both what you're running away from and what you're racing toward are within you. And I'm paraphrasing, but the truth is that. So it's the courage to face it and then to marvel at the magnificence of it. And so, yeah, lots of times people say, oh, avoid this thing, or they call it bad. Right. And like Shakespeare said, nothing, neither good nor bad, but thinking makes it so. Right. So we want to instantaneously label things. Why? Because it makes us feel a little bit safer. It makes us feel like there's some things that we can control, when in reality, there's absolutely nothing that we can control. But we just, this semblance of safety for some reason, I have a lot of theories on that, but not to take us off track because I digress easily, to come back. So when we say bad, good, whatever, but here's the thing. And oftentimes you might even hear it with something like nature. And I think that's a great way. We're all nature. We are nature as well, but natural phenomena, like a storm, for instance, and someone will say, oh, it's bad weather. But if you have ever stopped to just marvel at a storm coming in, to just look at, even just to look at it, you are confronted with something so magnificent and so gorgeous that any description of it would almost be mundane or impossible, right? Because we're describing something of such magnificence, such beauty, and that is life right there. So anytime there's a hiccup, anytime there's something, instead of being open and curious as children, we have been hyper trained to close down. And when we close down like that, we are literally closing down also our energy systems, hence also our connection with this source energy that is pumping our hearts and sending electrical impulses down to our legs, telling them to take one step after another feet, So that, I think, is where we can start to play around. And I really mean it as a play, as this sort of joyful play. You don't need to walk around all day and, think of label and categorize everything, because again, it's exhausting, but it is a deconditioning. It definitely is a deconditioning.
Yeah, I love that. And what I'm hearing from you is if we can have that awareness, we can be in the present moment, we can have acceptance, and then we can combine that with joy and play, then we're getting to a place where we can feel that peace within us. And I love that, and I love that concept. And I always try and think what my listeners and my viewers may be thinking as they're listening or watching this. And I'm sure they are saying, Cortney, Danielle, this all sounds great, but how do I get to that place? So, do you have any, I guess, tangible tips that people can actually physically do in order to help move them closer to that place?
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny because I get asked this a lot, tips and techniques and all that. And I'm kind of like, and they do have their place. And yet at the same time, I think the efforting of it around it that's your intention. And that's fantastic. Your intention to find peace within yourself is sort of that number one. Then there are things that you can quote unquote do, or I should even say not do, that are wildly profound and that will transport you into these other states of consciousness. However, in their simplicity, they often elude us. So there might be things that you hear someone say, you hear Danielle say something and you think, oh, okay, I think I've got it. But then in the minute that you go to kind of practice, it's almost like it's lost, right? So just being aware and playful around that as well. Because, for example, one of the things that I'm constantly on about, even with myself, whenever something strikes, is see if you could relax.
Yeah.
And it's just so simple that it evades us. Mm. And also, if we're really high strung, which I tend to be in environments with people in corporate, et cetera, where I'm working with very high performers, quote unquote, and all these kinds of things. And so, or at top universities where there's this constant struggle. And so when you hear relax, it can be incredibly frustrating. Yeah. Because you're like, oh, I am relaxed. I have it all under. And I can relate to that because that's where I was. So I would say someone would tell me to relax. And I'd be like, oh, I'm obviously very relaxed, because I was poised and all the things, but I was not relaxed.
Or you say, don't tell me to relax. I'm already relaxed.
Right. Or yeah, exactly.
Brings you to a place of stress.
Right. So sometimes we hear these things and we think, well, yeah, I am or whatever. But here's the thing. When we're totally relaxed, I want you to imagine this for a minute, right? When you're totally relaxed, say, for example, you're in a safe place, you're about to go to sleep, you are just completely relaxed. What happens? You're about to go to sleep, you're starting to drift through to different brainwave frequencies, you're actually becoming kind of superhuman in those moments, right? You're incredibly relaxed. That is your most natural state. However, right, we get into all of these games that we were talking about earlier with the mind, et cetera, where we get distracted and we forget that. So again, this is a remembering and relaxing, deeply relaxing into whatever is occurring around you is a practice until it's no longer a practice, until it is your default. So, I tell a lot of stories about this, and one that I told in my book was like finding out, right, post-pandemic, I'm supposed to go give this speech to, I think it was 150 chambers of commerce in Florida. I was headed there, whatever. And I think it was less than 48 hours before departing that I found out that my passport was expired.
Oh, no.
And there was absolutely nothing that I could do to remedy the situation. And so I just relaxed. And when I relaxed like that, this message was coming through, go to the airport anyway. And I'm thinking, go to the airport anyway. They're going to send me home, an hour and a half. But then I got out of the mind chatter and I just said, all right, well, I'm relaxed. And I had planned to go there. So why not? Right. And I tell the story through to the very end because it's so shocking. Each step is so shocking of the power of relaxing into it. And I still remember when I was standing in front of the counter with my expired passport, and I had two passports because I had my Italian passport and my American passport, but I couldn't travel on the Italian. But it was a long story. But regardless, the point was I was standing there, and in the past, I would have been praying or sending the intention that things went my way, that I was able to get to America, able to give this talk, able to do this, that, and the other. Instead, I was praying for the peace to be in my center, in my joy, regardless of the outcome. And as I said, the results were just, off the charts, to the point where a customs officer didn't even recognize that my passport was expired. A customs officer. So I won't go into the whole story, but that is the second key. So we relax and we ask. And you can call it prayer, you can call it intention, you can call it meditation, you can call it whatever you want. The important thing is that you are relinquishing this false sense of control and forcing, which is honestly not getting us anywhere, or getting us somewhere in a very deteriorated state. Once we get there, you relinquish that and you just say, I'm here, help. Help me stay in peace. Mm-hmm. Not help me get this, that, or the other. You have that. That is an impulse. That is a desire. That's wonderful. It's you release the attachment to it. And I could go on and on about that. So I'll leave it there for now and see what.
I love that. And what I love so much about that answer is I feel like as a society and maybe as a human race, I'm sure there's exceptions, but as a human race, we want these tips and techniques or even quick fixes in order to get us feeling the way we truly desire. But what I'm hearing from you, which is something I feel that most of us already know deep within us when we actually start to listen, is actually what it is about. It's about just going to that place within us where we have that peace all the time. It's always there, that peace. Being aware of that, being present with that, and trusting that. And actually, that is going to help us be guided the right way, feel the way we want to feel. And I know from my experience, I often say things like to my husband, for example, I'll say, oh, I feel really tired. I need to do something about this. So I need to do less work tomorrow, or I need to book a yoga class, or maybe I should have a massage, or maybe I should ask my team to help out with a few more things. And I'm constantly trying to think, what can I do to feel less tired? But actually, when I take that moment of peace, what I know within me is it's there. I don't need to do more. In fact, I need to do less. I need to surrender. I need to listen. I need to be. So, actually, I think, correct me if I'm wrong with saying all this, but what I hear from you is actually that we need to do less and we need to be more than we need to do.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. And, what at the very beginning of your response was human race. Where are we racing to?
So true. We're human beings.
Where are we racing to? There's a beautiful, I love in Alan Watts' work, he talks about, when you're dancing, you're not thinking about where you're going to end up on the floor. No. You're just enjoying it. Yeah. And to your point, yes, the universe, universo, one verse, one song, one, this one consciousness, this one intelligence, it is constantly providing these opportunities for you to grow into this consciousness, this awareness that you're all of it. Yeah. That you're all of it. You're the big bang and everything after, right? And before as well. You're all of it. And so it'll do this through things that, when we say we're tired, et cetera. And then what happens is oftentimes, to your point, which is a very, very lucid, very precise and eloquent point, is that we will try to do anything we can to not feel the discomfort of that evolutionary impulse, right? So we're tired. So we know, okay, there's a rest that needs to happen. There's a deep rest, or just let me honor this tiredness. And we'd rather do anything else, just like we'd rather do anything else than sit quiet in a room alone, as Pascal was saying, we'd rather do anything else. And that's what gets us into all our trouble, right? Is that we just don't want to listen, to your point. It's so uncomfortable sometimes. However, when we go into this, as you've learned to do, and as you teach, when we go into that deep listening, there's such magic and miracles on the other side that it gets more and more exciting. And there's almost like you don't maybe want to do other things sometimes, because it's like, wait, let me just sit in that deep listening, because I'm getting all these answers. More and more I'm operating in a way in my life that is astonishing to me, because whereas before I would toil and struggle, now it's these answers are coming through, the talks are coming through, the writing is coming through. And of course, there's been a whole lifetimes in this lifetime of efforting. And then it's relax, like we're talking about, relax. And I would, if you want to continue talking about this, there's more I would say about control and all of that as well, because I think it's something that a lot of us are plagued by.
We absolutely are, and it's fascinating as human beings how we. I mean, I'm saying beings now, which is interesting rather than human race. As human beings, we do want to control things so much, and what I'm really and there's so much I want to talk about. I'm also aware of time. There's so much I want to ask you because I know my listeners and viewers will want to know. But something that I wanted to touch on actually was how beautifully you explained everything about how you can now be and how you can effort less, which is wonderful. And I know for me personally, and I'm sure many of the people listening to this, have also managed to get to that place sometimes. Now, the reason I'm saying sometimes is because I think over the years, the more and more I have had this awareness, whatever you want to call it, deep intuition, connected to my soul, spiritual up level, whatever, however you want to label it or name it, I find that there's many more times where I can go into that peace and I can go into that awareness, but I don't always. So I also have times where I can get angry, I can get upset, I can get frustrated, and I'm not just feeling those emotions for a moment, being aware of them and letting them move on. I'm clinging on to them and I'm clinging them onto them for a while. Yes, I now have the tools within me to be able to move on at some point. But guess I'm just saying this because I want to make, I guess, everyone aware that even when we do know this and we have this understanding, we are human. We will feel things and we will cling on to those feelings and get in that loop a lot. This is something you experience as well, that actually you find that you can go back to those old conditionings or old patterns that you might have.
Yeah, I find it less and less with anything that's happening externally, but I definitely experience this beautiful array of sensation, emotion that oftentimes I can't even explain. I can't explain why the storm is coming in. I can just sit with it and kind of marvel at it in my own way. And oftentimes I feel like when we really get with it like that, we really, really get with it, we can't but marvel. We really can't. And so it's funny that the more that sort of has taken root, and the more that I have purposefully directed myself toward let go, let go, let go. And it isn't unlearning. It's an unlearning. We start out that way. If you look at a child, they get upset about just from a second to one, for second one to second two, it's they're screaming and then they're smiling their faces up. I mean, they are masters, right? They are absolute masters of living it all. Mm-hmm. And we came for the sensation. You talk, we often say that we have a body, right? We know we're not the body, right? The body is what's permitting this consciousness to experience, to feel, to touch, to taste, to marvel, to sit in awe, right? And to sit to sit with it, to really be with it, right? And so this is what this consciousness is moving to this form for. It's the gift. But when we don't recognize it as a gift, and instead we sort of attach to it, or we try to control. And this in and of itself, I think what has helped me the most to understand how to let that go, because I was very controlling. I mean, I was type A times, 3. I was, multiplied or whatever. Yeah, I was a triple A battery. I was very deeply conditioned to know that I have an objective and a quote unquote goal, and there are 100 steps to take to get it. And I'm going to take all of them and I'm going to get there. Right. And just to be clear, when you become aware of the things that we're talking about, or as you become more and more aware of the things that you and I are sharing, it's like, you don't stop the doing. the doing happens through you as a result of who you are. It's intrinsically motivated. It's a knowing that this consciousness wanting to express through this form. And so there is a doing. Like this morning, I woke up and I had this just intuition. I had to write to this person. And it was just, what did I do? I woke up, right? I sat in some quiet reflection, and then I laid down on the couch and I just dictated this letter to someone. And of course, when I say dictate, I truly mean dictate, right? So consciousness is, using this form to communicate something, right? And the more, again, that I've sort of relaxed into that, but how did I do that? So this, I think, is key, at least it was for me in making this transition more and more, was realizing the absurdity behind the idea that I can control anything. And knowing, because we also have to recognize and know that we're only doing this with a very tiny, infinitesimal part of our lives, right? So 99.99999 some odd percent of what is occurring both within and around you, you are not in any way trying to control. If you were, you'd lose your mind. Okay. So you're not trying to control the part of your brain, for example, the reticular activating system, that is filtering through the trillions of data to which you're exposed every day, right? You're not trying to say, wait, let me tell you, reticular activating system, how to do your job. You are not pretending that you need to control the beating of your heart, for example. And again, this is happening internally with the trillions of biochemical reactions occurring every second within your body, for example, and all these other things, but it's also occurring externally. So one of the things I often joke about is we don't go to bed at night saying, is the sun going to come up tomorrow? Is it not going to come up? Is it going to come up? Is it not going to come up? We don't do that because we would recognize instantaneously the absurdity of it. However, we then go and take that 0.00000 whatever 1% that's left over, and we say, wait, this part I've got to control. The relationship, the job, the social status, the whatever I'm wearing, whatever however it is that I am showing myself as a persona, as a character. And that's, again, a whole nother story. So we can get in that if you want, but this part I've got to control. So it's recognizing, it's almost finding the humor in it. Danielle, there's so much humor in the fact that we are trying to grip onto this. And it also comes from a place of, like I said, wanting to establish safety, but that's a nonsense in the sense that there's no rational sense behind it if we stop to examine it for a moment. So it's really just saying, oh, okay, that's kind of funny. That's cute. That's lovely. I was trying to do that again. That's interesting. And then that, for me, at least, has helped so much because I'm like, oh, really? I don't have to control it. And then the minute I relinquish the control, it's like, boom, everything comes, in ways that you couldn't even possibly fathom, that just delight you to no end, because you're like, oh my God, I didn't actually, I didn't need to make all that fuss. It's like a kid having a tantrum. So yeah.
That's amazing. Humor is so, so powerful in this, when we can actually almost laugh at ourselves. And I like to almost look at it like stepping outside yourself and looking inwards and going, oh my goodness. And sometimes you almost can have a giggle at the chatter that's going on in your brain and the negative thought patterns that are going on. And as soon as you just go, oh God, just laugh, it really just takes that pressure off. And it makes it not real. And that's the best thing about it. You realize it's not real. Those thoughts, those feelings, that negative loop, it's not real. It's not anything. The only thing that is real is what's deep within us, is that going back to that peace and that awareness and that all-knowing. Thank you, Cortney, so much. I feel like we're going to have to get you back for a part 2, but I know that you have books that people can dive into if they want to learn more about what you offer. Would you mind letting us know how they can get those and hear more about what you offer?
Sure. So my latest book is called Give Yourself Permission, and I really love it because it's a short read. My first book is an even shorter read. It's called Change Starts Within You. They both have a lot to do with intuition and happiness and how to find that, but not from, and confidence, but not from the traditional ways of defining those things, but really more along the lines of what we've been sharing here today. And so, yeah, the second book has been out for a couple of months. It is, it's everywhere where books are sold. You can find it everywhere. My website is cortinc.com. That's a short URL because my name is Cortney without a U. So it's CORT. And so we shortened it to cortinc.com. So people are sure to land on it. Because I think Cortney with a U gets you to some copywriter in Illinois. But I live in Italy and most of the year. And yeah, so those are, but I'm also on Instagram. I really like Instagram at Cortney McDermott, the full name. And LinkedIn as well is a place where I'm pretty active.
Thank you so much. I must show you
Danielle.
before we go, actually, what my obviously all the right t-shirts do. I think decent. I feel like that says everything about what we've focused on today. So
you did, and I wore a liberté.
This
like
is amazing. I love that. We've got freedom, we've got peace, we've got love.
We've got all of it.
Well, I'm sending you, Cortney, lots of peace and love and freedom and good wishes. So thank you so much for being a guest on the Face Yoga Expert podcast.
Thank you.